After 15 years of long-haul driving, Mike Rodriguez believed he had seen everything the American roadways had to offer. Nothing had prepared the 42-year-old Phoenix truck driver for what transpired on Highway 50 in Nevada during the summer of 2019. Despite the fact that he had transported cargo across every major highway through heat waves in Texas and blizzards in Montana, Mike's CB radio sprang to life on July 23rd, just after midnight. He was traveling east on what the locals refer to as America's loneliest road, a bleak asphalt section that slashes for more than 400 meters through the Nevada desert. He was transporting electronics from California to a warehouse in Colorado. According to the cargo list, a routine trip he had completed dozens of times previously. A voice said, "Breaker 19, this is Desert Fox. Over the static. Do you see that rig up ahead?" Mike modified his CB and answered, "At mile marker 127, this is Phoenix Mike traveling east. Desert Fox, what rig are you referring to? Peterbilt, big and white, no lights on the trailer. Has spent the last 20 meters pacing me, refuses to answer radio calls." Mike peered at the gloom in front of him through his windshield. Only his headlights could illumine Highway 50 as it extended eternally into the dark emptiness. There was nobody on the road. "Desert Fox, I don't see any Peterbilt up here. Are you certain about those lights?" "Good. This guy has been precisely as fast as I am. He speeds up when I speed up. The same thing happens when I slow down. He seems to be engaging in some sort of game." For a few minutes, the radio was silent. Mike kept on driving, looking at the road in front of him. With the exception of the occasional deserted service station or crumbling billboard, the desert on either side was a never-ending expanse of sand and sagebrush. The closest town was more than 100 miles distant, and there was no cell phone service out here. Next, Desert Fox returned to the airwaves, and he had a different voice, restrained. "The Phoenix. Are you still there, Mike?" "Yes, I am present." "How old are you?" "Marker for mile 135. Just now, this white Peterbilt arrived, adjacent to me. I can't see anyone inside, but the driver's side window is down. The taxi appears to be deserted." A shiver went down Mike's back. Since he was getting close to mile marker 130, Desert Fox ought to be only a few miles away. However, the road ahead of him was still entirely dark. "Fox of the desert, I can't see any lights at all, and I'm approximately 5 miles behind you." "Nothing. No running lights, no tail lights. That isn't feasible. I'm standing right next to this truck. It's a white late-model Peterbilt with chrome exhaust stacks that lacks DOT and business badges. Figures. Behind it, the trailer is all white. Not a mark." Mike's diesel engine roared in the desert silence as he stepped up the accelerator. There was a serious problem. He had been hauling for 15 years, and he had never encountered a situation like this. Trucks aren't just keep radio contact while vanishing from view. Try to outpace him, Desert Fox. Try to obtain a glimpse of the license plate. He always matches my speed exactly, even though I'm trying. It seems as though he anticipates my actions before I perform them. Mike observed them as he climbed a short hill. In the distance, there are 2 sets of headlights traveling at precisely the same speed side by side. But as he approached, he saw that the photo was seriously flawed. It was easy to see Desert Fox's rig, the truck on the right. The truck on the left was like a ghost, but the trailer was surrounded by a blue Freightliner with running lights. Its headlights and the broad outline of the cab were visible to Mike, but the details appeared to shimmer and fade as though he were viewing it through water. "I see you now, Desert Fox. Your running lights are visible to me, but there's a problem with that other truck." "What do you mean incorrectly?" Mike struggled to articulate what he was observing. It seemed like the white Peterbilt was there, but it wasn't. It was like to viewing a double-exposed photograph. Although I can't see it well, I can see it. It appears to be somewhat brittle. The voice of Desert Fox returned, tense with terror. "The Phoenix I need you to catch, Mike. Up to us. Something is going on here. My cab's temperature just plummeted by around 20 degrees, and I'm hearing interference on my radio." Mike's speedometer climbed above 75 meters when he stepped on the throttle. The 2 trucks in front of us stayed in perfect alignment, neither moving faster nor slower. Mike was able to discern more information regarding the enigmatic white truck. The cab looked to be a Peterbilt model from the 1980s, yet it was immaculate, as though it had just been taken from the factory. The chrome was flawless. The weather and road use have not tarnished the white paint. How long have you been traveling with this truck, Desert Fox? 45 minutes or so right now. The strange part comes next. I've never seen him apply the brakes, not once. He has never applied the brakes while we have navigated curves, uphills, and downhills. He never slows down. Mike could now see both of them. Trucks, obviously. The blue Freightliner owned by Desert Fox was a typical working truck that had been driven thousands of miles. However, the white Peterbilt had the appearance of having been kept in a museum. It was free of dust. The windshield is free of bug spatter. The tires are in perfect condition. Fox of the Desert, I'm going to make an effort to separate you two. Try to gain a better view of the driver. Phoenix, exercise caution. Mike, something is seriously amiss here. After shifting into the left lane, Mike started to pass Desert Fox. He could clearly see the bearded driver of the blue Freightliner as he drew beside it. A man with white knuckles clutching the steering wheel while wearing a baseball cap. However, Mike's blood froze when he turned to face the white Peterbilt to his left. There was nothing at all in the driver's seat. The truck was operating on its own. Mike's hands were shaking as he reached for his CB microphone. Fox in. The desert, that truck is not being driven. The taxi is deserted. That isn't feasible. Trucks are not self-driving. No one is in that taxi, I assure you. No one. For some minutes, Mike remained parallel to the white Peterbilt, taking in every detail. To keep the truck centered in the lane, the steering wheel was spinning on its own and making small adjustments. As the truck negotiated a small hill, the gear shifter moved by itself. The windshield, however, was the most unsettling of all. The whole cab was empty, and Mike could see right through it. No one, no driver, no passenger. The white Peterbilt suddenly started to move toward Mike's direction. Mike had to swerve to avoid a collision, first slowly and then more forcefully, his trailer swinging dangerously as he struggled to keep it under control. He's attempting to drive me crazy. Mike yelled into his cover receiver. Who? The white truck. Yes, he is directly approaching me. Mike sped up, overtaking both trucks in the process. He could see in his mirrors that Desert Fox and the white Peterbilt had returned to formation. As though nothing had happened, the two trucks kept traveling down the highway at precisely the same speed. I'll use my satellite phone to make a call to the Nevada Highway Patrol, Desert Fox. This is incorrect. Well thought out. This is plenty for me. Mike called the Nevada Highway Patrol's emergency number. A dispatcher replied after a few rings. This is Maria from Highway Patrol. What emergency do you have? Mike Rodriguez is this person. Near mile marker 140 on eastbound Highway 50, I drive a truck. There's a problem out here. For nearly an hour, a white Peterbilt vehicle without a driver has been harassing another trucker. A pause occurred. Sir, did you say no driver? Yes, exactly. The truck is driving itself, but the cab is empty. Another driver has been being paced by it, and it simply attempted to drive me off the road. Please stay on the line, sir. I am sending a unit to your address. Could you explain the truck? Peterbilt, white. It appears to be a model from the 1980s, however it is in excellent shape. No dot numbers, no corporate markings. It is towing an unmarked white trailer. Where are you right now? Mike checked his GPS. Still traveling east at mile marker 142. The Unit 47 is en route. About 20 minutes is the estimated time of arrival. Are you able to keep your eyes on the suspicious car? Yes, it is visible to me. It continues to run next to the other truck. Mike stayed on the road and followed the two trucks for the next 15 minutes. The Highway Patrol dispatcher on the phone. The white Peterbilt never veered off course, varied its speed, or displayed any other characteristics of typical human driving. It resembled seeing a machine go along a predetermined path. Then, when Mike's rearview mirror showed the oncoming patrol cars flashing lights, an extraordinary event occurred. The white Peterbilt just disappeared, not slowly, not by veering off the road, but all at once. It vanished after a brief period of existence. Where has Desert Fox disappeared to? I'm not sure. There he was, and then he simply vanished. About a mile down the road, Sergeant James Walsh of the Nevada Highway Patrol stopped both trucks. He radioed for support and used powerful spotlights to search the area for more than an hour after getting statements from both drivers. They discovered nothing. No car debris, no tire tracks going off the road, and no sign of the white Peterbilt. In 22 years of patrol work, this is unlike anything I've ever seen. But I think what you're saying me is true, Sergeant Walsh said to Mike. Your stories are a fantastic fit, and it's obvious that you're both disturbed. Later, Mike found out that Desert Fox, whose actual name was Carl Henderson, had been so traumatized by the event that he had taken a small delivery job in Reno instead of continuing with long-haul trucking. Highway 50 was never driven by him. Again, the tale doesn't stop there, though. When Mike began asking other truckers about their experiences on Highway 50, he was horrified by what he learned. At least a dozen drivers have reported seeing a white Peterbilt that seemed to drive itself during the previous 30 years. It paced them, according to some, for several hours. Some claimed it attempted to eject them from the road. In each instance, when police arrived, the truck would disappear completely. Tommy Kowalski, a seasoned truck driver who had been operating Highway 50 since the 1980s, provided the most terrifying information. He informed Mike of a deadly mishap that happened in 1987 when a white Peterbilt struck a family's station wagon close to mile marker 135 in a head-on collision. 3 family members and the truck driver were killed instantly. For no apparent reason, the truck abruptly crossed the middle line while it was heading east. Robert Bobby Henshaw, a 34-year-old truck driver from Utah with a flawless safety record and 12 years of driving experience, was the driver. The accident's cause was never identified. Toxicology testing revealed that Henshaw had no drugs or alcohol in his system, and his truck was discovered to be in fine mechanical condition. The cause was reported as unknown in the official report. Mike attempted to confirm this account using documents from the Nevada Department of Transportation, but the 1987 files had been destroyed in a warehouse fire in 2003. He did, however, discover a small reference to the accident in an Eli Daily Times article from 1987, which validated the fundamental information Tommy had given. Mike has driven Highway 50 numerous times since his encounter in 2019, but he has never spotted the white Peterbilt again. He has spoken with other truckers who have gone through similar things. It is always late at night, between mile marks 130 and 150, and it always describes a spotless white Peterbilt without a driver. Although Sergeant Walsh, who is now retired, acknowledges in private that he has gotten similar calls at least 6 times in his career, the Nevada Highway Patrol has not taken an official stance on the reports. Responding authorities never discovered the enigmatic truck. Mike's routine has changed permanently, but he still drives large distances. He no longer drives alone at night on Highway 50. At least 2 additional trucks always accompany him on his journey. Additionally, he never turns off his CB radio. Because 37 years after his passing, Bobby Henshaw is still traveling the same path in the Nevada desert on the most desolate road in the United States, forever stuck in the never-ending night of Highway 50, unable to stop or rest. Having driven trucks for 23 years, Danny Kowalski took great satisfaction in his ability to tackle any challenge that came his way. The 45-year-old Detroit native had witnessed collisions, mechanical failures, and all types of weather. But nothing had prepared him for what transpired on a foggy October night in 2018 on Interstate 40 in Oklahoma. Danny first noticed her in his headlights at 2:47 a.m. Due to construction delays in Missouri, he was around 2 hours behind schedule while transporting a load of auto parts from Michigan to Texas. He had to slow down to 45 miles per hour on the usually congested interstate because the fog had drifted in after midnight, lowering visibility to perhaps 50 feet. About 20 feet from the guardrail, she was standing on the eastbound lane's shoulder. A woman with long dark hair that hung loosely around her shoulders was wearing what appeared to be a white outfit. Danny could tell she was crying despite the dense fog as she faced the highway. Sobs were trembling through her entire body. Danny immediately wanted to stop and offer assistance. Throughout his trucking career, he had made numerous stops to help stranded drivers, but he was hesitant about this woman for some reason. Other than sobbing, she was standing motionless. Furthermore, there was not a single wrecked vehicle in the area. Nothing, Not even a jacket or purse could account for her being by herself on the freeway at almost 3 in the morning. He reached for his CB. This is Motor City, Breaker 9. Danny, heading east on I-40 at 238 miles. Is there anyone else? Here who sees a woman on the shoulder? The cab was silent for a few seconds before someone spoke. Danny, this is Roadrunner, 10 miles behind you. Which woman are you referring to? A white-dressed woman standing on the sobbing on the right shoulder. She appears to be in need of assistance, yet something about it doesn't feel right. When I get there, I'll keep an eye out. You dial 911. Danny thought about it. I will. Definitely call them. This doesn't appear to be typical. As he passed the woman, he kept one eye on her and used his satellite phone to ring 911. She never raised her head. She kept sobbing while keeping her face buried in her hands, without acknowledging his truck. After receiving his information, the dispatcher for the Oklahoma Highway Patrol assured him that a unit would be sent to check on her. However, after 20 minutes, Danny's radio crackled once more. The Motor City. This is Roadrunner, Danny. I recently went by mile marker 238. There isn't a woman here, my friend. Shoulders are vacant. Danny scowled. Are you certain? There she was, as plain as day. Long dark hair, a white outfit, and tears in her eyes. Danny, nothing here. Perhaps someone picked her up. Perhaps. However, Danny felt uneasy about it. After passing her, he had been keeping an eye on his mirrors and had not noticed any other cars. There was nowhere to go anyhow, and the fog was too dense for her to have walked very far. For miles in both ways, Interstate 40 sliced across, barren farmland. Danny refueled and got coffee at a truck stop in Oklahoma City 3 hours later. At the gas pumps, he was conversing with another driver when the man said something that chilled Di to the bone. Did you hear about last night's I-40 accident? Regarding mile marker 238, the driver inquired. A woman crossed the street directly, in front of a semi. The fog made it impossible for the driver to halt. Danny began to shake his hands. What? How did she appear? I don't know all the specifics, but according to the press, she had long, dark hair and was dressed in a white outfit. Occurred at approximately 3:30 a.m. Truly tragic. Taking out his phone, Danny looked up local news. The Oklahoma City News website had it. A woman passes away in a traffic collision. Although it was short, the piece verified the information. At around 3:30 a.m., Maria Santos, 28, of Oklahoma City, was killed by a semi-TR on eastbound I-40 close to mile marker 238. She had long dark hair and was dressed in a white dress. The truck driver's name was not disclosed. Freed was not prosecuted because it appeared that the woman had stepped straight into traffic while there was a lot of fog. About 45 minutes before Maria Santos passed away, Danny knew he had seen her, but it was impossible. At 2:47 a.m., he had witnessed her standing on the shoulder, sobbing. The news report states that she passed away around 3:30 a.m., which implied that, unless he had seen something else totally, she hadn't even been struck when he saw her. Despite his best efforts, Danny couldn't stop thinking about that night for the next few weeks. He began by asking other truck drivers if they had encountered any oddities while traveling on I-40 in Oklahoma. The majority merely shook their heads, but others gave him glances that suggested they were more knowledgeable than they actually were. Stating, at a truck stop in Arkansas, he was finally called aside by an old-timer named Pete Garrison. You asking about that crying woman on I-40? Quietly, Pete asked. Over the last 5 years, you've seen her 3 times. The same location every time, always in the vicinity of mile marker 238. Long dark hair, a white dress, and tears that seemed to have been torn from her heart. I also phoned the police the first time I saw her. They never came up empty-handed. However, the night that woman was killed, I saw her. The timing is illogical. Pete's face became serious. I have some awful news for you, Danny. It wasn't the first time, Maria Santos. My second sighting prompted me to do some investigation. In the last 8 years, 4 women have been murdered there, every one of them between 2 and 4 a.m. They're all in fog. They're all dressed in white dresses. Danny was ill. 4 females. In 2010, Rebecca Martinez, Chen, Jessica, 2013. Maria Santos in 2018 after Amanda Foster in 2016. They all simply stepped out in front of trucks. Nothing, no suicide note, no explanation. Simply walked straight into traffic. That isn't feasible. People don't randomly choose to cross the street. I had that thought. I so began to delve further. There appears to be a pattern. All of these women had lately ended their relationships with their boyfriends. Nasty splits. For example, when a man threatens to harm them if they attempt to leave. Danny was silent for a while. Do you believe that they are being forced out there? They're being lured out there, I believe. And since I've seen that sobbing woman twice since, I believe that whatever is going on is still going on. Maria Santos passed away. Last month was the most recent. Danny had trouble falling asleep that night. He couldn't stop thinking about the woman he'd seen standing on the shoulder, the pattern of fatalities, and Pete's statements. He wanted to talk to someone about the I-40 wrecks when he called the Oklahoma Highway Patrol the following morning. Although Sergeant Linda Martinez, who had no connection to the victim, was open to speaking, she was unable to provide much specifics regarding the ongoing investigations. It was concerning what she could tell him. A woman in white has been seen standing on the shoulder close to mile marker 238 on several occasions, she said. Typically at 2 or 3 in the morning, always when there is fog. Every time, we send out troops, but we never come across anyone. Do you believe that the accidents are related? I can't prove that, but off the record, I do. The odd thing is that before every crash, witnesses observed the woman on the shoulder. The timing never makes sense, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour beforehand. What are you saying? People like you claim to have seen her before she's even there. It was 2:47 a.m. when you noticed her. However, according to her roommate, Maria Santos didn't even leave her apartment until 3:15 a.m. Who did you see then? Danny didn't know how to respond to that, but he began traveling longer routes and avoided I-40 in Oklahoma. He shared his story with other drivers, cautioning they should use special caution near mile marker 238. Pete Garrison called Danny 6 months later. You must hear this, Danny. Carlos Mendoza, a driver, and I were conversing. He has been maintaining a journal of every time he sees that woman in tears while driving I-40 regularly. In the last year, he has seen her 11 times. Always in the fog, always between 2 and 4 a.m. 11 times. Yes. And here's the actual unsettling aspect. Carlos began to take photos. Danny, he's got pictures of her. There are clear photos of a white-clad woman sobbing on her shoulder. However, she is not visible in the pictures when he exhibits them to others. All that is seen in the photos is an empty shoulder. That isn't feasible. I had that thought. I therefore requested that Carlos email the pictures to me. On my PC, I examined them, and I had a clear view of her. However, my wife insisted there was nothing when I showed them to her. Only concrete and fog there. A shiver went down Danny's back. What do you say? Whatever that thing is, I'm saying it. I believe it's trying to tell us something, but only truckers can see it. Danny was attempting to get to Dallas before his delivery deadline 2 weeks later, while traveling east on I-40. Although he had intended to take an alternative route, he was compelled to return to the feared section of highway due to construction delays. Fog was beginning to sweep in at 2:15 a.m. Danny's CB radio came alive around mile marker 237. This is Smokeokie Joe at mile marker 240 for all eastbound traffic. Up ahead, I have a woman in white on my shoulder. She's sobbing quite a bit. Is anyone else observing this? Danny gripped the steering wheel more tightly. This is Danny from Motor City, Smokey Joe. I'm around 2 meters behind you. Don't stop at anything. Make a 911 call and continue driving. Why? She appears to be in need of assistance. Believe me. Call the police and keep driving. Danny looked at his speedometer. Decreased to 40 mph apiece beach as the mist grew. A familiar face caught his headlights at mile marker 238. Once more, the white-clad woman stood on the shoulder and sobbed. However, something was different this time. Her mouth was moving and she was staring at his truck. She had something she wanted to tell him. Danny took hold of his CB. Are you still there, Smokeokie Joe? Yes, I just got past her. I'm dialing 911 right now. Excellent. She seems to be attempting to alert us to something. The woman's lips formed words as Danny passed her, but he was unable to hear them above the sound of the engine. Tears were running down her cheeks as she hurriedly pointed toward the eastbound lanes ahead. Then Danny saw why. An automobile, completely invisible in the fog, was stopped in the right lane about half a mile ahead without any hazard lights. If Joe Smokeokie, he would have crashed straight into it if he hadn't slowed down after spotting the woman. Danny reached for his receiver. A half mile ahead of you, Smokey Joe. Dead halt in the right lane. No warning, no lights. At this moment, you must move into the left lane. I see it. I almost struck it, Jesus. Regards, Danny. At mile marker 239. The Oklahoma Highway Patrol subsequently verified that they had discovered an abandoned car in the right lane. It appears that the motorist had run out of gas and left without installing any warning systems. Until you were directly on top of it, it was absolutely undetectable in the dense fog. Danny understood that it wasn't that the sobbing woman was attempting to trick anyone into dying. She had been attempting to alert them to impending danger. Only the truckers who had perished had been able to see her, so perhaps she had been attempting to warn people all along. Since that night, Danny has traveled I-40 through Oklahoma several times. He has already seen the woman in tears 6 more times, near mile marker 238, constantly in the fog. Every time he has discovered a danger up ahead, a car with a disability, trash in the road, or abandoned construction equipment. Additionally, he has consistently been able to alert other drivers in time to prevent catastrophes. Maria Santos and the other ladies who perished on that section of roadway, in Danny's opinion, are still there and working to keep others from meeting the same end. Truckers see them since they are the ones who most likely to be driving through that area at night, when the risks are most likely to have CB radios to alert others and most likely to be willing to assist. Though they no longer react as quickly, the Oklahoma Highway Patrol continues to get reports of the sobbing woman. They are aware that truckers must alert other drivers to potential dangers when they spot her. It has evolved into an unauthorized, early warning system manned by female ghosts, who spent eternity attempting to help others avoid their own dangers after dying trying to escape their own. Along with images of the other 3 women who perished on I-40, Danny now keeps a picture of Maria Santos on his dashboard. He views them as his angels of protection, keeping watch over him and his fellow truckers on the most desolate sections of the U.S. highway system. He also sends a silent prayer of gratitude for the warning and the bravery of the women who refused to allow others perish the way they did each time he sees the woman in tears. Tom Big Dog. After 18 years of hauling freight across the Southwest, Williams believed he knew every asphalt mile between Albuquerque and Los Angeles. The 52-year-old Bakersfield truck driver had experienced heat waves of 100 degrees, flash floods, and desert storms. However, nothing had prepared him for what transpired early on September 15, 2020, on the former section of Route 66 in New Mexico. The majority of truckers completely avoided Route 666. Due to the numerous accidents, graffiti, and odd occurrences connected to the Devil's Highway, the route was formally renumbered to Route 491 in 2003. However, Tom's GPS had taken him onto the old roadway since he was running late for a delivery to Gallup. Should stay away from Interstate 40 construction. He reasoned that he had traveled on worse roads and that his bottom line would benefit from the gasoline savings from choosing a more direct route. The man on the shoulder was first seen in the light of Tom's headlights at 3:22 a.m. A man in his 30s dressed in trousers and a faded denim jacket with his, in the classic hitchhiker's gesture, the thumb is extended. Tall and slender, the man's pale skin and dark hair seemed to shimmer in the truck's headlights. Initially, Tom wanted to continue driving. After hearing too many terrifying tales from other drivers, he had ceased picking up hitchhikers years ago. But he slowed down because of something about this man. Perhaps it has to do with his posture. Utterly motionless, neither moving nor scanning their surroundings like most hitchhikers did when they heard a car coming. Or perhaps it was the absence of any broken-down vehicles in the area. There's no reason why someone would be standing by himself on this lonely highway section. 3 a.m. After passing the hitchhiker by roughly 50 yards, Tom parked his pickup. The man was still standing there, thumb out, not approaching the truck, and Steve could see him in his side mirror. The hitchhiker didn't move even after Tom waited for a full minute. In his own words, "That's weird," Tom said. He reached for his CB. "This is Big Dog traveling south on Route 666 close to mile marker 47, breaker 1N. Has anyone else spotted a hitchhiker?" A gruff voice answered after a few seconds of static filled the cab. "Big Dog, this desert rat is around 20 miles behind you. Which kind of hitchhiker are you?" Discussing. Standing on the shoulder with his thumb out is a man wearing a denim jacket. A really pale-looking man. It's odd that he isn't approaching my truck. I'll be watching. Do you pick him up? Tom took another glance in his mirror. The hitchhiker remained motionless, standing in the same place and sticking out his thumb. There's a problem with this person. I will continue to drive. Tom shifted into gear and headed south. He observed the hitchhiker in his mirrors as he drove off. The man didn't move, didn't drop his thumb, and didn't turn to watch the truck drive away. He remained motionless like a mannequin until he was engulfed by the darkness. After 20 minutes, Tom's radio began to crackle once more. "This is Desert Rat, Big Dog. I recently crossed the 47th mile milestone. There are no hitchhikers here, friend." Tom scowled. "Are you certain?" He was as visible as day on the shoulder. "Big Dog, nothing here." He might have been taken up. However, Tom had been keeping an eye on his mirrors and had not noticed any other cars. The hitchhiker had been standing there when Tom lost sight of him, and at this hour, Route 666 was almost deserted, with perhaps one automobile every 10 or 15 minutes. After 30 miles, Tom's headlights caught another figure on the shoulder, despite his best efforts to ignore it. It was the same man standing in the same spot, thumb out, wearing the same denim jacket. Tom's heart was racing as he slammed on the brakes. There was no way. Without a car, no one could have gone 30 meters in 20 minutes, particularly not through the desert that encircled Route 66. Tom reached for his CB. "Are you still there?" "Desert Rat, yes." "What's up, Big Dog?" "The hitchhiker. He's back. Milestone number 77. The jacket, the guy, everything is the same." "That isn't feasible. As of mile marker 55, I haven't come across any hitchhiker." In his headlights, Tom gazed at the man. There was a change in him, but it was unquestionably the same man. His clothing appeared more worn out. He had a paler complexion. Additionally, there was a problem with his eyes. Like the eyes of an animal, they were reflecting the headlights with an artificial light. "You there, Big Dog?" Over the radio came Desert Rat's voice. "Yes, I am present. There's something wrong with this guy. His eyes are bright. Return?" Tom glanced again and blinked. The man was still standing in the same stiff posture, thumb out, not approaching the truck, but his eyes were normal now. Tom concluded that he had had enough. Pressing the accelerator, he continued to drive. However, the hitchhiker reappeared 5 miles later. The stance, the strange stillness, the same point on the shoulder. Tom was becoming anxious. There was no signal as he reached for his cell phone to dial 911. Route 666 traversed some of the most isolated. There were very few cell towers in the New Mexico desert. "I want you to contact the police, Desert Rat. Somehow this hitchhiker is pursuing me. I don't think he's human, and he keeps popping up every few miles. How are you feeling, Big Dog? Perhaps you ought to stop and take a nap." "I'm all right. I am aware of what I am witnessing. This guy keeps showing up and going away, and he's always in the same spot. There is a serious problem here." Tom kept driving, but now he saw the hitchhiker every 2 or 3 miles, always with his thumb out and on the right shoulder, standing motionless at all times. However, the man appeared increasingly incorrect with each appearance. His eyes got more reflecting, his clothes more faded, and his skin paler. On the 10th sighting, Tom saw that the man's jacket was ripped and covered in what appeared to be blood or oil. Tom came to a decision at mile marker 112. Whatever this thing was, he was going to halt and face it. He stopped and went to his cab to get a torch. About 20 feet away, the hitchhiker was still standing in the same stiff position. "Hey!" exclaimed Tom. "You need help or what?" The hitchhiker remained silent, didn't move, and didn't even recognize Tom. Tom approached, focusing his flashlight beam on the silhouette. He could see that there was a serious problem with the man's face as he approached within 10 feet. He had waxy gray skin. His mouth was hanging open, and his eyes were glazed. Just a little. "Jesus," Tom said in a whisper. This individual wasn't alive. This was a dead body. With a loud crack, the hitchhiker's head suddenly jerked toward Tom. His mouth widened as his hazy eyes remained locked on Tom's face, exposing teeth that have turned black. His throat made a sound, something terrible that chilled Tom's blood. Not quite a scream, not quite a moan. After sprinting back to his truck, Tom locked the door and slammed it. Outside, he could hear the creature's footsteps crunching on the gravel shoulder. Tom. The hitchhiker was standing right behind his trailer, still sticking out his thumb, but his head was cocked at an unimaginable position, as if his neck were broken, as he peered in his mirror. The hitchhiker was visible in Tom's mirrors, for a lot longer than it should have been, but he blasted the accelerator and drove off. At the same speed Tom was traveling, the figure appeared to be following the truck as it glided across the desert. Tom didn't feel secure enough to breathe until he topped a ridge and lost sight of the creature. The nightmare, however, was far from ended. Tom spotted the hitchhiker at least a dozen more times over the next 50 miles. Every apparition was more unsettling than the one before. Parts of the creature's body were occasionally absent. Occasionally, it held its own severed head in place of its thumb. Occasionally, it was standing against gravity, upside down. Tom was trembling violently by the time he arrived in Gallup at dawn. He claimed to have food illness and called in sick to his dispatcher after checking into a motel. He looked up Route 666 online all day, and what he discovered chilled him to the bone. The path had been the scene of numerous deadly collisions throughout the years, many of which involved hitchhikers who were murdered by oncoming cars. Tom was particularly interested in one case. Marcus Webb, a 34-year-old vagabond, was killed in 1987 while trying to hitchhike to California, close to mile marker 47. Before the driver knew what had happened, he had been hit by a semi-truck and dragged for over half a mile. Tom saw a hitchhiker who exactly fit Marcus Webb's description: identical height, physique, and denim jacket. Although Marcus Webb was one of several, the police report stated that Webb's neck had been fractured in the collision, which would account for the tilted head Tom had observed. Tom discovered that at least 8 additional hitchhikers had been slain throughout the last 30 years on Route 666. All of the males, all in the 25-40 age range, were hit by cars while attempting to seek a ride. Tom glanced again and blinked. The man was still standing in the same stiff posture, thumb out, not approaching the truck, but his eyes were normal now. Tom concluded that he had witnessed sufficient. Pressing the accelerator, he continued to drive. However, the hitchhiker reappeared 5 miles later. The stance, the strange stillness, the same point on the shoulder. Tom was becoming anxious. Reaching for his cell phone, he made a call. 911, but no signal was present. Cell towers were scarce as Route 666 passed through some of New Mexico's most isolated deserts. "I want you to contact the police, Desert Rat. Somehow, this hitchhiker is pursuing me. I don't think he's human, and he keeps popping up every few miles. How are you feeling, big dog? Perhaps you should stop and take a nap." "I'm all right. I am aware of what I am witnessing. This guy keeps showing up and going away, and he's always in the same spot. There is a serious problem here." Tom kept on driving, but the hitchhiker was now in his sights every 2 or 3 miles, always standing motionless, always on his right shoulder, always with his thumb out. However, the man appeared increasingly incorrect with each appearance. His eyes got more reflecting, his clothes more faded, and his skin paler. On the 10th sighting, Tom saw that the man's jacket was ripped and covered in what appeared to be blood or oil. Tom came to a decision at mile marker 112. Whatever this thing was, he was going to halt and face it. He stopped and went to his cab to get a torch. About 20 feet away, the hitchhiker was still standing in the same stiff position. "Hey," exclaimed Tom. "Are you in need of assistance?" Tom received no response, no movement, and no acknowledgement from the hitchhiker. Tom approached, focusing his flashlight beam on the silhouette. He could see that there was a serious problem with the man's face as he approached within 10 feet. His eyes were clouded over, his mouth was slightly open, and his skin was waxy and gray. "Jesus," said Tom in a whisper. This individual wasn't alive. This was a dead body. With a loud crack, the hitchhiker's head suddenly jerked toward Tom. His mouth widened, exposing blackened teeth, and his clouded eyes stared at Tom's face. His throat made a sound. Something terrible that chilled Tom's blood. Not quite a scream, not quite a moan. After sprinting back to his truck, Tom locked the door and slammed it. Outside, he could hear the creature's footsteps crunching on the gravel shoulder. The hitchhiker was standing right behind his trailer, still sticking out his thumb, but his head was cocked at an unbelievable position, as though his neck were broken, when Tom looked in his mirror. The hitchhiker was visible in Tom's mirrors for a much longer than it should have been, but he escaped the accelerator and drove off. At the same speed Tom was traveling, the figure appeared to be following the truck as it glided across the desert. Not until Tom reached the top of a hill did he feel secure enough to breathe after losing sight of the object. The nightmare, however, was far from ended. Tom spotted the hitchhiker at least a dozen more times over the next 50 miles. Every apparition was more unsettling than the one before. Parts of the creature's body were occasionally absent. Occasionally, it held its own severed head in place of its thumb. At times, it was standing against gravity, upside down. Tom was trembling violently by the time he arrived in Gallup at dawn. He claimed to have food illness and called in sick to his dispatcher after checking into a motel. He looked up Route 66 online all day, and what he discovered chilled him to the bone. Over the years, the road had seen dozens of deadly collisions, many of which included hitchhikers who were murdered by oncoming cars. Tom was particularly interested in one case. Marcus Webb, a 34-year-old vagabond, was killed in 1987 while trying to hitchhike to California, close to mile marker 47. A semi-truck had struck him, and before the driver understood what had happened, it had been pulled for over half a mile. Tom saw a hitchhiker who exactly fit Marcus Webb's description: identical height, physique, and denim jacket. According to the police report, Tom saw Webb's head inclined, which may be explained by the fact that his neck had been fractured in the collision. Marcus Webb, however, was only one among many. At least 8 additional hitchhikers who had been slain on Route 66 in the previous 30 years were listed in Tom's archives. All of the males, all in the 25-40 age range, were hit by cars while attempting to seek a ride. After 12 years of driving West Virginia's mountain roadways, Jake Morrison was an expert on Route 19, knowing every bend and curve. Through the Appalachian Mountains, the 38-year-old Charleston truck driver had transported everything from coal to construction equipment, negotiating sharp turns and steep hills that would have scared off most drivers. However, nothing had prepared him for what transpired on a soggy November night in 2019 on Dead Man's Curve. Dead Man's Curve was a well-known stretch of Route 19 that took a dramatic S-curve around a cliff face approximately 15 miles south of Summersville. Over the previous 40 years, the bend had been the scene of numerous deadly incidents, earning it the moniker. Drivers who sped through the turn and plunged over the guardrail, crashing into the ravine below, were responsible for the majority of single-car collisions. However, in some of the most unsettling incidents, drivers claimed to have swerved to avoid something in the road, but when investigators got there, they discovered nothing. The time was 11:47 p.m., moment Jake's headlights first caught sight of them. Just before the abrupt left turn that marked the start of Dead Man's Curve, 3 little individuals were seen standing in the center of the northbound lane. Youngsters, about 8 or 9, dressed in what appeared to be pajamas or nightgowns. Their eyes were like mirrors reflecting his headlights as they stood motionless in front of his approaching truck. Jake wanted to stop hard, but he was moving 45 meters per hour while carrying 40,000 pounds of steel beams. He was not helped by physics. Instead, as he struggled to stay clear of the kids, he jerked the steering wheel sharply to the left, feeling his trailer start to jackknife. The trailer swung out as his truck went sideways across the damp pavement, toward the direction of the guardrail. For a horrifying second, Jake believed he was losing it. Through his passenger window, he could see the ravine's darkness. As the weight of the trailer changed, feel the truck tilt. The truck, however, straightened up immediately in front of the guardrail in an impossible way. Jake was able to recover and pull. His heart was beating so loudly that he could hear it over the diesel engine as he stepped over onto the narrow shoulder. For a few minutes he sat there, trembling, trying to take in what had just transpired. Then, grabbing his flashlight, he went outside to see how the kids were doing. However, there was nothing when he returned to the spot where they had been. No bodies, no kids, no indication that anyone was in the road at one point. Jake used his flashlight to check the woods, the shoulders, and even the edge of the ravine as he made his way around Dead Man's Curve. He called out, thinking perhaps the kids had fled into the forest to hide, but all he got was the sound of his voice resonating off the walls of the cliff. He reached for his CB. Mountain, this is Breaker 1N. Jake, heading north Dead Man's Curve, Route 19. Are the children in the road visible to anyone else? Before a voice answered, the air was static for a few seconds. Coal Runner is approximately 5 miles behind you, Jake. Which children are you referring to? 3 kids, no older than 8 or 9, were standing directly in the center of the road. They are no longer there, but I had to swerve to escape them. Jake, are you certain about that? It's raining heavily outside. It's not really visible. Jake took another glance around. The curve was obscured by mist from the valley below, and the rain was now falling very heavily. I am aware of what I observed. 3 children standing directly in the road in their nightgowns. In my attempt to dodge them, I almost ran over the railing. When I get there, I'll keep an eye out. Do you call the police? Jake thought about it. What was he going to tell them? That he had observed 3 kids who had disappeared into thin air. Yes, I will give them a call. There's a problem here. The West Virginia State Police dispatcher took Jake's information after he contacted 911 on his satellite phone. After being sent to the location, Trooper David Chen showed up 20 minutes later. He and Jake looked everywhere, but there were no kids in the vicinity. Trooper Chen said it might have been deer. They can occasionally resemble persons in the dark and rain, especially to a weary driver. Jake answered, I've been driving these mountains for 12 years. I am aware of the distinction between children and deer. These were children standing straight up in the street dressed in white pajamas. Though he didn't seem persuaded, Trooper Chen noted it in his report. Tonight, we'll monitor this location. We'll locate any children who could be out here. However, Jake suspected they would find nothing. He couldn't get the image of those 3 kids standing in his headlights, their eyes reflecting the light with an uncanny intensity, out of his mind as he drove away from Dead Man's Curve. He hadn't noticed it until now, but there had been a problem with their looks. They had appeared too flawless, too quiet, and too pale. Jake began questioning other drivers about Dead Man's Curve at a truck stop in Beckley the following morning. A couple of them murmured something that chilled Jake's blood, but the most were aware of the accidents. You see those kids too? Inquired Bobby Fletcher, an old-timer. I've seen them at least a dozen times in the 30 years that I've been driving this road. The same 3 kids every time, in the same place every time, always dress in white. You've already seen them. The first time occurred in 1992. Like you, I almost died attempting to dodge them. Went straight into the trees and off the road. They were gone when I went outside to see how they were doing. Nothing, no footprints. Jake was ill. Have other drivers noticed them? More than you could imagine. I keep track, but most don't talk about it for fear of being labeled crazy. Over the years, I've spoken with at least 20 drivers who have experienced the same thing. Avoiding those kids almost caused them all to crash. Bobby reached into his glove compartment and took out a battered notebook. On my 3rd sighting, I began to keep a log. Everything, timings, dates, and weather. Are you curious about something intriguing? The time frame for each sighting is 11:30 p.m. to midnight, and it always happens in inclement weather. No matter what, rain, snow, fog, it never happens on a clear night. Jake read the notes Bobby had left. The identical thing was detailed in each entry. Driver swerved and almost crashed because of 3 kids in white nightgowns standing in the road at the deceased man's curb. In fact, a few drivers had crossed the guardrail and suffered fatalities or severe injuries. Bobby, do you believe that these children could be related to the mishaps? As if they were attempting to alert drivers to something. Bobby's face became serious. For long, I also held that opinion, but after learning more about Dead Man's Curve's past, I had a change of heart. He produced a folder containing photocopied articles and newspaper clippings from local publications as far back as the 1980s. Take a look at this 1987 one. An automobile accident near Dead Man's Curve claimed the lives of a family of 5. An automobile carrying parents and 3 kids, aged 7, 8, and 9, slid off the road during a downpour and tumbled into a ravine. Jake perused the article. The family Hendricks had been operating a vehicle. Their automobile went off the road and fell into the ravine while they were returning home from a church session. The 5 members of the family were all slaughtered at once. The kids were said to be dressed in their Sunday attire, which would have included a white shirt for the boy and white dresses for the girls. Just 2 months after this accident, the first sighting of the children was reported, Bobby added. Additionally, each and every A driver who has witnessed them says the same thing. 3 children in white, all of the appropriate ages. They appear to be the children of the Hendricks. However, why would they want to cause mishaps? They're not attempting to cause mishaps, in my opinion. I believe they are attempting to seek assistance. They continue to stand in the road because they are unaware that they are dead, wishing someone would pause and assist them. However, like the Ricks family, cars who swerve to escape them wind up falling off the cliff. A shiver went down Jake's back. You're implying that they repeatedly caused the same accident that killed them. At Dead Man's Curve, I've counted at least 15 collisions when vehicles swerved to avoid an object in the road that wasn't there when the cops arrived. Jake had trouble sleeping that night. He couldn't stop thinking about the 3 kids and the fear in their eyes as his truck pounded them. If Bobby was correct, they stood in the road where they perished, caught in a never-ending cycle, and other families had to endure the same outcome. Jake made the decision to conduct his own study. He visited the Summersville Library and researched the Hendricks family in any way he could. Since it had been one of the biggest incidents in the history of the area, it received a lot of newspaper coverage. Sarah, Michael, and Jennifer Ricks were the children's names. They were 7, 8, and 9 years old, respectively. The description of the accident scene was what made Jake's hands shake, even if the pictures featured 3 adorable kids with innocent eyes and bright smiles. The children's remains were recovered a few yards from the Hendricks automobile, which was reported by the police to have been located at the bottom of the ravine. Still in their white church robes, they were discovered lying together in a tiny clearing after being flung from the automobile during the collision. The examiner of medicine observed that there were no indications of fight or pain on the children's bodies, and they seemed to have died instantaneously. One witness said they appeared as though they were simply napping. Records of additional incidents at Dead Man's Curve that corresponded with Bobby's timeline were also discovered by Jake. When assistance arrived, drivers reported swerving to avoid youngsters on the road, but nothing was there. The trend was obvious. Only 2 months after the Ricks family's death, the sightings began, and they have continued on a regular basis ever since. However, Jake's discovery of a 2003 surveillance report was the most unsettling. Following a string of mishaps, the West Virginia Department of Transportation had motion-activated cameras installed near Dead Man's Curve. The cameras had recorded multiple incidents of cars veering sharply around the bend, but the video revealed no kids on the road. To prevent nothing, the cars were swerving. The drivers, however, all maintained that they had a clear view of the kids. They were consistent in their descriptions. 3 kids standing in the center of the road, their eyes reflecting the headlights, wearing white nightgowns. Some drivers went so far as to describe the faces of the children in detail. Details that matched the Hendricks children's newspaper images. The kids weren't only showing up for driving, Jake understood. They were selectively showing up. They were only seen to a select few, and Jake had been one of them. However, why? Why did some drivers pass through the curve without any problems, while others were vulnerable to the sightings? In an attempt to identify commonalities, he began interviewing other drivers who had witnessed the kids. He discovered something unsettling. All of the drivers who had witnessed the kids were parents. All of them had their own kids, typically about the same age as the Hendricks kids. Jake's own children are a 9-year-old boy and a 7-year-old daughter. 2 of the Hendricks children were exactly the same age. Similar circumstances were experienced by other drivers who had saw the kids. It seemed as though the deceased kids were attracted to grown drivers who would naturally want to keep kids safe, even if they were ghosts. However, the accidents were being caused by the protecting instinct. Drivers who were most inclined to swerve to avoid the youngsters would see them and end up over the guardrail, sometimes even carrying their own families. Jake began transporting a small memorial candle and pictures of the Hendricks kids in his vehicle. He would pause each time he passed a dead man's curb and offer a prayer for the kids, pleading with them to find serenity and cease showing up to other drivers. In addition, he began alerting other truck drivers about the curb, not only because of the state of the roads, but also because of the kids. Some drivers paid attention, but most believed he was insane. And gradually, there were fewer accidents near Dead Man's Curve. But daring drivers claim that the kids continue to show up, enough to acknowledge seeing them. They continue to wear their white nightgowns, stand in the middle of the road in inclement weather, and reflect the headlights with their naive eyes. Instead of swerving wildly, vehicles now know to slow down when they notice them. They are able to safely proceed through the curb after acknowledging the kids with a wave or a nod to let them know they have been noticed. Jake has made hundreds of trips around Dead Man's Curve. He has encountered the kids 3 more times since that night in 2019. But this time he slows down and talks to them through his windshield rather than swerving to avoid them. "I see you," he murmurs. "You must quit blocking the road, even though I understand that you are afraid and that you want to get home. Someone will be harmed by you." Every time the kids appear to pay attention. Slowly, they move away and disappear into the night as they turn to face his truck and meet his eyes through the glass. Even though Jake has never had to swerve before, he is aware of their presence, anticipating the next driver who may not be aware of their story. Dead Man's Curve's kids are stuck in death forever, attempting to find their way home, but only knowing how to stand in the road where their trip came to a stop. And they serve as a constant reminder that certain mishaps start their own never-ending tragedies. Furthermore, some kids never grow up. They continue to stand in the street in the hopes that someone will eventually pull over and give them directions home. After 21 years of cross-country traveling, Ray Nighthawk Patterson had witnessed every conceivable weather, road condition, and traffic scenario. Despite 100-car pileups, tornadoes, and blizzards, the 46-year-old Sacramento truck driver had transported goods from coast to coast. However, nothing had prepared him for what transpired on February 14, 2021, during a whiteout blizzard on Interstate 80 in Wyoming. Ray was carrying a bunch of gadgets from California to Chicago, with the storm causing them to be almost 3 hours behind schedule. This snowstorm had occurred at 9:00 p.m., and the Wyoming portion of I-80 was known for abrupt weather shifts. The wind was howling across the plains with enough force to rattle his 40-ton rig, and visibility was down to maybe 20 feet. The Rye was a seasoned winter driver, but the Wyoming Department of Transportation had issued a no needless travel recommendation. He had reduced his speed to 35 mph and was navigating the whiteout by following the reflective markers on the right shoulder. He could hear other truckers on his CB radio, either crawling along like him, waiting for the storm to pass, or pulled over. The time was 11:23 p.m. when Rye's mirror lights first appeared. Behind him, 100 yards or so, were red tail lights that were just barely visible through the churning snow. Ray was not taken aback. Using the lead truck's tail lights as a guide, other truckers frequently followed one another through inclement weather. But as the minutes went by, Ray became aware of an oddity. Behind him, the lights were in perfect alignment, as though several trucks were following in a straight line. At least 6 sets of taillights, all keeping precisely the same distance from his truck and from each other, were visible to him. Ray reached for his CB. "This is Nighthawk, westbound I-80 near mile marker 215, breaker 119. I have a convoy behind me, but the radio is silent. Come back, you guys back there." The cab was filled with static. Ray awaited a reply, but it never arrived. He made another attempt. Convoy at my rear. It's Nighthawk here. Are you all going quiet or what? Amid order to stay awake amid this confusion, some conversation would be helpful. Nothing has changed. Ray took another look at his mirrors. The flawless formation of the 6 sets of taillights remained intact. However, the lights themselves had a problem. They appeared to be shining from within and were excessively red and brilliant, instead of merely mirroring his headlights. In the hopes that the trucks behind him would pass, Ray reduced his speed to 25 mph. However, they also slowed down while keeping the same distance. They precisely matched his pace when he accelerated to 40. They appeared to be attached to his truck by unseen wires. This is becoming strange. To himself, Ray mumbled. He gave the CB another go. Is there any traffic heading east? This is Nighthawk at mile marker 210 heading west. A convoy appears to be approaching you. A close formation of 6 trucks. This is Desert Storm eastbound at mile marker 195, said a crackling voice. And I don't see anything out here, Nighthawk. Visibility is about 0. You sure you got company back there? Ray checked his mirrors. The lights were still there, still red in the snow. Good. 6 trucks were running about 100 yards behind me, and they wouldn't answer the radio. That's odd because most drivers talk a lot in this kind of weather, so perhaps their radios aren't working. The convoy behind him instantly followed suit, their lights shifting to the right in perfect unison, and Ray canceled his turn signal and began to move toward the shoulder as if he was going to pull over. But Ray had never seen 6 trucks with radio issues all at once, so he decided to test something, retreated to the middle of the lane, and the convoy trailed behind, seemingly mimicking his every step, but with a small lag that made it seem almost robotic. Desert Storm, are you still there? Ray asked into his CB. Yes, Nighthawk. What's your situation? These trucks seem to be imitating everything I do, following my every move, changing lanes when I signal, and maybe they're simply being cautious, following your lead through the storm. Ray thought about this. In his years of driving, he had never seen trucks maintain such perfect formation, especially in a blizzard, and the silence was unsettling. During bad weather, truckers always communicated via radio, sharing information about road conditions, accidents, and police activity. Ray thought he would try something more dramatic, so he pulled into the left lane and sped up to 50 mph, a speed that was unusual for him. This is not normal, Ray said into his CV. These trucks are following me like they're remote-controlled or something. Ray slowed down to 15 mph, and the convoy followed, their lights shifting to the left lane in perfect synchronization. This is dangerous speed in these conditions. How are you feeling, Nighthawk? Perhaps the storms frightened you. Ray was beginning to wonder the same thing, but when he checked his mirrors again, he saw that the lights were still there, still glowing with that strange red intensity, and he counted them again. 6 sets of tail lights in perfect alignment, maintaining precise formation, until he saw something that made his blood freeze. Instead of simply following him, the lights were approaching him in quick bursts, as though the trucks were teleporting forward a few feet at a time. They were 100 yards back 1 second, 90 yards the next, 80 yards, and then 70 yards. They're gaining. Ray's voice was tight with terror as he spoke into his CB. I can't see them moving, but the convoy is getting closer. They are simply leaping. Ahead. My opinion is that you should stop and rest, Nighthawk. Your mind is messed up by this storm. Ray was unable to stop, though. He was now only 50 yards from the trucks behind him, and through the snow, he could make out more details. Not all of the lights were red. Their pulses resembled heartbeats. Additionally, there was a problem with the truck's actual shape. They appeared to be from an other age. They were too tall and angular. There was no signal as Ray reached for his cell phone to dial 911. Dead zones were common on Wyoming's Interstate 80, and the storm was likely affecting the towers anyhow. He was alone. Now that the convoy was 30 yards behind him, Ray could see the truck silhouettes through the snow. They were vintage rigs, most likely from the 1970s or 1980s, with long hoods and high rectangular cabs, but they were in excellent shape. No road grime, No weathering, no rust. They appeared as though they had just been taken from the manufacturing floor. This isn't real, Ray told himself. This isn't possible. However, there was no denying the presence of lights in his mirrors, and they were approaching. 20 yards, 15, 10. Ray could now see that the trucks were devoid of any form of identifying signs, including corporate logos and identification plates. Like mechanical ghosts, they were merely faceless rigs that followed him through the storm. Ray could see into the lead truck's cabs at 5 yards. A figure in a trucker's cap and a bulky winter coat filled the driver's seat, but Ray was unable to identify any of its features. The guy stared straight ahead, hands on the steering wheel, motionless. It never turned its head, never moved, and never shown any signs of life. Ray pressed down on the accelerator, forcing his truck in the blizzard at unsafe speeds. Yafa, convoy kept their 5E gap, easily matching his speed. Now Ray could hear their engines, a deep rumbling that sounded like thunder rolling across the plains, coming from everywhere at once. The caravan then began to pass him, moving one truck at a time, not all at once, precisely and mechanically into the left lane. Ray saw the driver clearly as the first vehicle drove up beside his cab. The figure's face was incorrect, but it was dressed like a trucker from the 1970s, complete with a denim jacket, baseball cap, and aviator sunglasses. Ray could see ice crystals developing on the sunglasses, and the skin was waxy and gray. The mouth of the figure its breath was not fogging in the cool air, and it was hanging open. Ray became aware that he was staring at a corpse. The third truck followed, then the second. Every driver had the same appearance: breathlessness, open mouth, ice crystals, and gray skin. Without noticing Ray's presence or displaying any awareness, they were all looking straight ahead. Ray shook his hands and grasped his CB. Mayday, mayday. This is Nighthawk traveling west on I-80. Dead truckers are following me. Dead truckers, I say. Please, someone answer. The air was static. Then a distorted, faint voice could be heard. I'm Nighthawk. Can you hear me? Indeed. I can hear you. Yes. Who is this? The convoy commander is this person. We have been anticipating your arrival. The blood in Ray froze. The convoy was the source of the voice. He spoke to one of the dead drivers. For 40 years we have been traveling this road. The voice went on, becoming more distinct as it waited for a companion. We continued to drive in 1981 despite the storm. We never stopped driving. In 1981, Ray recalled hearing about a huge pileup on I-80. Several drivers had been killed in a whiteout crash involving multiple trucks. Though the specifics were unclear, he believed it had occurred in this region. The voice said, "We're not dead," as though it could read his mind. Where Nighthawk said, "The road never ends. Just driving, always driving. The road never ends." Ray's truck was now totally encircled by the convoy. He had 3 trucks to his left and 3 to his right, all in perfect alignment. With their ice-covered sunglasses reflecting his headlights, the deceased driver's gray faces were now turned toward his taxi, and they were all staring at him. "Join us," said the voice. "Get out of your truck and pull over. The cold won't harm you. When you're driving forever, nothing hurts." Ray became aware of what was going on. He was being recruited by the convoy in an attempt to join them on their never-ending trek. For all eternity, he would be just another gray-faced motorist, gazing straight ahead and traveling the same path. Ray said into his CB, "No, I will not accompany you. I'm still alive." "You will be," said the voice. "Just like the storm took us, it will take you. However, you don't have to pass away alone. Come along with our convoy. Join us for a lifetime of driving." Ray was forced to the shoulder as the truck started to close in. Through the snow and into the blackness of the Wyoming plains beyond, he could see the guardrail drawing closer. He would perish from exposure in a matter of hours if he were to leave the road in these conditions. But Ray thought of something. He recalled a story about ghosts that his grandfather had told him. The laws of their own era confined them. They might have been trapped in 1981 technology if the convoy had perished in 1981. Ray grabbed his CB and changed to the normal trucker station, number 19. He then changed to Channel 9, which was the emergency channel that was most popular in the 1980s. He had witnessed it. in vintage films and television series. Breaker 9. This is Nighthawk calling for help in an emergency. I was in a predicament on I-80 heading west, 200th mile marker. Suddenly, the engines of the convoy became louder and more violent. The deceased driver's jaws widened, revealing blackened teeth as they turned to face Ray's cab. This is the Wyoming Highway Patrol dispatcher for Breaker 9. We have a copy of your urgent call. What's up with you, Nighthawk? Ray was unsure if the person was a dispatcher or perhaps a member of the occurrence, but he was complicit. I have unauthorized vehicles following me. Ask for help right now. Nighthawk, copy that. Units are being sent to your location. Are you able to stay in your current role? No, I'm being forced off the road by the cars. I get it. Units are en route. Avoid interacting with the unapproved cars. Again, don't participate. Ray's own cab looked to be the source of the loud boom coming from the convoy's motors. The deceased drivers were getting closer, their tongues moving in mute screams, their faces pressed against their windows. Then, all of a sudden, there was silence. Ray was by himself on the highway when the convoy vanished and the engines stopped. The wind had subsided, and he could see farther than before, but the snow was still falling. Ray checked himself in the mirror. Nothing. There were only his own tire tracks in the snow on the deserted road behind him. Reaching for his CB, he returned to Channel 19. Is there any traffic outside? It's Nighthawk here. Is there anything out of the ordinary happening on I-80 tonight? A voice answered. Right away. At mile marker 180. This is Desert Storm traveling east. About an hour ago, Nighthawk, you vanished from our sight. We have been attempting to contact you. Where have you been? Ray checked his watch. The time was 1:47 a.m. It felt like only minutes, but he had lost more than 2 hours. I'm not sure. A convoy was following me, and I had to deal with it. Which convoy? You're the only westbound traffic I've heard from during the entire night that I've been watching this channel. Ray tried to figure out what had transpired for the remainder of the night. The odometer on his truck indicated that he had traveled the correct distance, even though he had lost 2 hours of time. He had filled up with the right amount of petrol. With the exception of the lost time and the trucker's memories, everything was as usual. As soon as he began looking into the 1981 accident as soon as he arrived in Salt Lake City the following morning. He discovered an archive of newspapers that described the collision. On February 14, 1981, precisely 40 years before Ray's meeting, a blizzard had caused a multi-vehicle pileup involving 6 trucks. After their trucks were taken off the road, all 6 drivers had perished from exposure. The article included pictures of the drivers and their names. Ray recognized them right away. Except for the death pal and the ice crystals, they were the same gray faces he had seen in the caravan. However, the accident report contained the most unsettling information. At about 11:23 p.m., the convoy had been heading west on I-80. As they came to the snowstorm, the convoy was forced to collide with one another in the pitch-black conditions after the lead vehicle they were following mysteriously vanished from the scene. He might have been the lead vehicle they had been pursuing all along, Ray realized. He had somehow summoned them back to the road on the anniversary of their passing, and they had been attempting to finish there by accompanying him through the storm on his last voyage. On February 14th, Ray never again drove I-80 into Wyoming. On the anniversary of the collision, he always arranged his routes to avoid that section of the highway. However, similar experiences have been recorded by other truckers. They were followed through winter storms by convoys of vintage trucks, keeping flawless formation at all times, invariably propelled by those who do not answer radio calls. Although these claims are not formally acknowledged by the Wyoming Department of Transportation, seasoned dispatchers are aware that lone truckers heading west on I-80 during winter storms should be given extra attention. They have established a procedure for responding to reports on phantom traffic and have learned to maintain radio contact with drivers who report anomalous convoy behavior. Although Ray continues to drive cross-country, he has incorporated a new custom into his daily schedule. He prays for the 6 drivers who lost their lives in 1981 each time he crosses mile marker 200 on I-80. He begs them to stop driving, find some calm, and eventually arrive at their destination. And occasionally, on calm evenings with no wind, he believes he can hear In the distance, their engines continued to rumble across the Wyoming plains, continuing on the same path that the storm had taken them 40 years prior. Drivers courageous enough to share their experiences say the Phantom convoy is still out there. They are still attempting to finish a voyage that ended in death and ice on a February night in 1981. They are still keeping immaculate formation, and they are still following lead vehicles through winter storms. Additionally, truckers are constantly reminded that some highways never end and that some journeys never arrive at their destination place, and some drivers never make it home. They simply continue to drive, mile after mile, into the rain indefinitely. Eddie's freight train. After 8 years of driving the nightly shift on Interstate 5 through the Central Valley of California, Russo believed he was familiar with every noise a diesel engine could produce. The Fresno truck driver, 41, had listened to engines as he transported everything from machinery to produce throughout the state. Through hundreds of thousands of miles, we snarl and purr. However, nothing had prepared him for what he heard on a foggy October night in 2020, close to mile marker 77. Eddie first heard it above the sound of his own engine around 2:15 in the morning. A high-pitched yelling sound that like metal breaking under intense tension. He checked his mirrors and saw that the southbound lanes were vacant, but it was coming from somewhere behind him. He should have been able to see headlights if there had been another truck back there, but the fog was so dense that visibility was only around 30 feet. Eddie reached for his CB. Breaker 119. This is the southbound I-5 freight train at mile marker 78. Anyone? Is anyone else hearing that yelling noise? The cab was silent for a few seconds before someone spoke. Eddie, this is Valley Runner, about 5 miles behind you. What yelling noise are you referring to? It sounds like a distressed engine, maybe a seized or blown turbo pistons. Extremely high-pitched, like to metal yelling. This has been going on for the past 2 minutes or so. Back here, I don't hear anything out of the ordinary. Are you certain it isn't your own rig? Eddie heard the sound of his own motor. The diesel purred in its typical cadence and it was running smoothly, but the screaming was growing louder and more powerful, as if the thing that was causing it were drawing nearer. Not mine, of course. I see no lights, but this sound is coming from behind me. Tonight there is a lot of fog. Perhaps someone is struggling, and the headlights are off. Eddie reduced his speed to 50 mph in the hopes that the stranded car would go by. However, the shrieking increased in volume as he slowed down, as though the source was keeping up with him. His own engine noise was now being drowned out by it, a metallic shriek that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then Eddie's blood froze as he noticed something in his passenger mirror. Through the fog, there was a dim orange glow that flickered and pulsed like flames. However, it wasn't the red flash of emergency lights or the constant brightness of headlights. This was a very different matter. I'm seeing an orange light behind me, Valley Runner. It appears to be maybe a fire. A fire? Would you like me to dial 911? Yes, it's better to be safe than sorry, but I'll investigate first. Eddie grabbed his flashlight and pulled over to the shoulder. Now the yelling was so intense that it hurt to stand next to a jet engine. He strode to the rear of his trailer and illuminated the fog with his light. He could not explain what he saw. A huge object was creeping through the fog about 50 yards behind his truck. Although it appeared to be a scimitar, it was completely incorrect. The proportions were incorrect, the cab was too tall, and the orange light was illuminating the entire car. The source of the shouting, however, was the most unsettling of all. The truck's hood had been ripped off, exposing the engine, which was actually on fire and running at inconceivable RPMs. Eddie saw flames pouring out of every hole in the engine block and pistons working so quickly that they were only a blur. Without a driver in sight, the truck was operating itself, and it was on his way directly to Eddie's place. With his heart racing, Eddie sprinted back to his cab and slammed the throttle, reversing course and rejoining the freeway. However, the yelling engine remained precisely 50 yards behind him regardless of how rapidly he drove. That orange glow was always there, throbbing through the fog like a mechanical heart. But it was impossible to see the vehicle clearly because of the fog. You, Valley Runner. Still there? Yes. What's up with you, Eddie? A burning truck of some sort is following me. Even when the engine is burning, it continues to run. It's exactly the same speed as me, and I can't see a driver. That doesn't make sense, Eddie. When an engine is burning, it doesn't run. They jump up. I'm aware of what I am witnessing. This vehicle is following me down the highway while its engine screams like a banshee and shoots flames everywhere. Eddie increased his speed to 70 mph in an attempt to outrun the burning truck. Dense fog. However, the yelling engine remained directly behind him, never approaching but never retreating. Now the vibration seemed to be tearing apart Eddie's inner soul, and the sound was so strong that he could feel it in his bones. The voice of Valley Runner then sounded frightened as it passed through the CB. I just crossed mile marker 77, Eddie. Something is burning on this shoulder. It appears to be Jesus. It appears to be a truck that has been in a serious collision. What sort of truck is it? It's difficult to tell. It's rather charred. However, it appears that this occurred some time ago, Eddie. Weeds are growing among the ruins, and the metal is completely rusted. This isn't new. A shiver went down Eddie's back. Milestone number 77. About 10 minutes ago I passed that. Nothing was present. There. Well, something has arrived, and the screaming noise you mentioned is audible to me, Eddie. The wreckage is the source of it. Eddie checked himself in the mirror. Though it appeared to be diminishing, the orange glow persisted. The yelling was growing softer and farther away. Is the wreckage still making noise, Valley Runner? Yes, but it's waning. The ghost is finally leaving whatever's left of the engine. The orange glow vanished into the fog as Valley Runner spoke, and the yelling behind Eddie subsided to nothing. Once more driving alone, Eddie was trembling so much that he could hardly grip the steering wheel. Eddie returned to mile marker 77 in daylight the following morning. The shoulder had nothing on it. There was no burn damage, no wreckage, and no indication that anything had ever occurred there. However, when he inquired, he discovered that other drivers had shared identical situations at that precise spot while he was out at truck stops. Pete Garrison, an old-timer, informed Eddie about a 1994 tragic accident that had happened at mile marker 77. When Carlos Mendoza's engine caught fire, he was transporting a load of chemicals. Pete clarified that he attempted to continue driving in order to reach a safe location for a stop, but the fire spread too quickly. His truck exploded after it went off the road. They discovered him still operating a vehicle, severely burned. When Eddie looked into the accident, he discovered newspaper stories that supported Pete's account. When Carlos Mendoza lost control due to an engine fire, he was traveling south on I-5. As he struggled to keep control, witnesses said they heard his engine screaming at inconceivable RPMs. Before firefighters were able to put out the fire, the truck had been burning for hours. However, the accident report contained the most unsettling information. After his engine caught fire, Carlos drove for over 2 miles. On the highway, his truck left a trail of oil and fire. Witnesses claimed they would never forget the sound of his engine screaming from miles away. Every misty night on Interstate 5 was replayed incessantly until Eddie knew he had seen Carlos Mendoza's last trip. With an engine that should have died decades ago, the deceased trucker was still screaming down the highway, still struggling to control his blazing rig, and still trying to get to safety. Eddie has passed mile marker 77 hundreds of times since that night, but only 3 more times has he heard the yelling engine. Every interaction has the same pattern. The orange glow of a vehicle that has been burning for more than 25 years. The sound of an engine in crisis, and dense fog. Eddie prays for Carlos Mendoza every time, hoping that the deceased trucker would eventually find the safe haven he sought on that awful night in 1994. Having driven the southeastern routes for 16 years, Marcus Steel Wheels was intimately familiar with every way station between Atlanta and Miami. The 44-year-old Birmingham truck driver has dealt with DOT inspectors who were anywhere from cordial to outright antagonistic on more occasions than he could recall. However, nothing had prepared him for what transpired at Highway 301's abandoned way station on a muggy August evening in 2021 in South Carolina. Thanks to light traffic, Marcus was able to get approximately an hour ahead of schedule while transporting auto parts from Tennessee to Jacksonville. The way station's green light was visible through the dense summer fog that had blown in from the wetlands at 3:47 a.m. Despite having driven this road numerous times, he was unable to recall a way station at this particular site. The scale house was illuminated as if it were midday, and the electronic sign said, "All trucks must enter," in vivid orange lettering. With a groan, Marcus moved into the right lane and headed for the scales, following the painted instructions. He would rather finish the inspection than run the risk of receiving a ticket for avoiding a required way station. However, as Marcus got closer to the scale platform, something didn't feel quite right. Compared to the contemporary way stations he was accustomed to, the facility appeared to be much older. There were no other trucks nearby, which was uncommon for a busy highway like 301, and the architecture was from the 1960s or 1970s, with that institutional brick appearance that made him think of old government buildings. On the scales, Marcus rolled his truck and awaited the all-clear to move forward. However, a voice spoke over the intercom speaker in place of the standard automated system. Like an old radio transmission, it was distorted and scratchy. "Please turn off your engine and come to the office so that you can be inspected, driver." The scale house caught Marcus's attention. He could make out a figure in what appeared to be a dot through the windows. Uniform, but the fog obscured the details. After turning off his engine, he retrieved his license, registration, and log book. The office door was made of frosted glass and sturdy oak, the same type that was installed in government buildings decades ago. Marcus shoved it open and entered. The stench of stale cigarettes and old paper filled the musty, thick air. Overhead, fluorescent lights buzzed, giving everything a sickly green tint. A 50-year-old man in a Doe inspector's costume sat behind the desk. However, there was a problem with his appearance. His eyes were sunken and bloodshot, and his skin was waxy and colorless. His uniform appeared genuine, but faded, as though it hadn't been washed for years. Registration and license. The inspector's voice sounded as though it were coming from a well's bottom. Marcus gave his papers to him. The inspector examined them with motions that appeared excessively deliberate and slow. His nails were chipped and yellow, and his fingers were abnormally slender and lengthy. The inspector read, "Marcus Johnson," from the license, driving for Southeastern Freight in Birmingham, Alabama. He raised those terrible hollow eyes to Marcus. "You have too much weight. Are you overweight?" "In Nashville, I weighed 78,000 pounds. That is much below the limit." When the inspector grinned, decaying, brown teeth were visible. "No, Mr. Johnson, not your truck. You've got too much on your plate." A cold shiver went through Marcus. "I don't get it." "Feeling guilty, Mr. Johnson?" "I'm sorry." "Disgrace. Your driving is suffering as a result of your excessive emotional burden." The inspector's voice was becoming more distorted and deeper. "Until you reduce your load, I will have to impound your truck. Way stations don't operate that way. For emotional baggage, you can't impound a truck." The inspector got to his feet, and Marcus saw that he was at least 7 feet tall. His arms were too long for his physique, and his uniform was buckling at the seams. "My way station is this. Mr. Johnson, I determine what is too hefty to travel with." Marcus retreated in the direction of the door, but it was gone. There were no windows or doors on the solid brick wall behind him. The office was shrinking, the barriers getting closer every second. The inspector's voice was now a hollow whisper as he stated, "You killed that family in Tennessee. You crossed the center line 3 years ago while you were asleep at the wheel. You were too exhausted to stop driving, and a woman and 2 kids died." Marcus's knees went weak. He had never discussed the Tennessee accident with anyone and had made an effort to forget it. He had been exonerated of any misconduct by the probe. The collision was attributed to black ice. Marcus, however, was aware of the reality. He had been behind the wheel for 18 hours. He drifted across the yellow line, struggling to stay awake. A whisper, "I was cleared of all charges," came from Marcus. "Charges? Not guilt, though. Mr. Johnson, don't you carry their deaths with you every day? Their faces are visible in your mirrors. In your engine noise, you can hear their screams. Well, Mr. Johnson, that's weight, emotional burden that puts you at risk while driving." Now Marcus stood squarely in front of the inspector. His face is just inches away. He had a motor oil and rotting odor to his breath. Until you're correctly balanced, you can't go. Until the weight penalty has been paid. Marcus was back in his truck when he opened his eyes after closing them. He was parked on the scale platform with the engine running. Now that the fog had cleared, he could see that the weigh station was deserted. The old brick building was covered with rust stains, the windows were boarded up, and weeds were growing through the pavement cracks. With trembling palms, Marcus reached for his CB radio. Breaker 119, this is at mile marker 47 on steel wheels, southbound 301. Does anyone have any information regarding this old-fashioned station? Immediately a voice answered. About 10 miles in front of you is Gator Bait heading north. Steel wheels. Whose weigh station are you referring to? That section of 301 is devoid of active scales. This is an antique brick structure that has scale platforms. It appears to have been deserted for many years. Oh, that location. Yes, the former Clarendon station is located there. Since the early 1980s, it has been shuttered. Steel wheels, however. Did you not attempt to enter there? Marcus's throat constricted. Why? It's not a good reputation there. Even when it was active, drivers used to report odd occurrences happening there. Harold Briggs, an inspector, spent 20 years there. They claim it's a real hard case. Would force drivers to sit for hours without cause and discover infractions where none existed. Then they discovered him dead at his desk one evening in 1982. They said he had a heart attack, but his expression was contorted as if he had witnessed a horrific event. Marcus was silent for a while. What after then? What became to the station? With various inspectors, they attempted to keep it open, but none of them stayed. They all made the same report. Hearing voices in the office, feeling as though they were being watched, and having broken equipment. Even after Doty shut it down in 1983, drivers continued to see lights in the facility at night, and some claim that a dead man has pulled them in for inspections. It dawned on Marcus that Harold Briggs was not the only driver he had met. The deceased inspector continued to operate his ship and stop vehicles for infractions that only existed in his deranged imagination. Additionally, drivers who bore the same kind of guilt Marcus had been carrying around for 3 years really appealed to him. Gator Bait. Have you been dragged in there before? Approximately 5 years ago. You most likely went through the same scenario. The lights are on, the inspector is in the office, everything is in order. However, I sensed something malevolent and intent on harming me as soon as I stepped out of my truck. I returned to my rig and drove off. And I won't never return. Marcus took another glance at the deserted building. A little flickering light caught his eye through one of the shuttered windows, and he knew Harold Briggs was still inside, waiting for the next guilty driver to pull onto his scales. Marcus engaged the gears on his truck, and he knew he would return, yet he drove away. To the deceased inspector, the guilt he carried from the Tennessee disaster was like a beacon calling. Harold Briggs would continue to pull Marcus over and attempt to collect the weight penalty that Marcus had been carrying for 3 years until he was able to forgive himself. Similar experiences at the now defunct Clarendon Way Station have been recorded by other drivers. Always in the fog, always at night, always with the same dead inspector, still working his shift 40 years after his death, and always with the same admonition about carrying too much weight. Still working to remove unsafe drivers from the road by obtaining the guilt that renders them incapable of operating a motor vehicle. Even though Marcus continues to drive Highway 301, he has never been stopped at the abandoned Way Station. Because of the accident in Tennessee, he began seeing a counselor, and gradually the burden of his shame started to lessen. And when it did, Harold Briggs' weigh-in green light station ceased phoning him since he was at last transporting a load that was acceptable for the vote. The vote.